Good day, dear students. In the previous two classes, you were listening to English literature and the Victorian age from where we started. In this class, you are going to learn more about modern literature. That is, after the Victorian age comes modern literature or modern age. Victorian age is also otherwise termed as the 19th century, while modern age or modern literature belongs to the 20th century. So here you find that the age of Queen Victoria ended and then it started to be something new, because the birth of a loyalty or the end of the one queen and her reforms ended by the 19th century, and afterwards you find a new uh, queen reigning, and the 20th century coming into the foremost. But let's see about the social background of this modern literature. You will find that in England this was a time of changes, changes for the better, let's say, because it is also the time when women started arguing for vote, and they had really a lot of things going on, and naturally their protest about not having the voting power was to be heard, because till that time people refused to believe that women had any right at all. I'm saying this because it has got a lot of relevance about in feminism, and it is from here you find feminism gathered its momentum. So naturally, this is something that you will have to consider. So here, this is one aspect that really turned the world over, and it started in England. So here, women also started coming to the forefront, and it is also a time of education. Education not just for the higher upper class, but and the nobility, but also for the middle class, and also for women. So all in all, it was a time for people to come to the forefront, especially women, and this gained momentum. It was also a time for poetry to develop, and it is also a time for more fiction writing or novels. Though we are dealing with poetry, I can't but mention Thomas Hardy, who is a poet but mainly known for his novels. And it was at this time, or that is towards the very beginning of this 20th century or the end of the 19th century, that uh, Thomas Hardy started writing. And Hardy's heroines were all feminist in one way or the other, and you find yourself enjoying that. That is a little bit of a deviation from appreciating poetry, but since you are learning more about literature in general, you will have to learn more about the other genre of literature like novel, prose, and drama, all developed during this time. Developed in the sense that novel gained a momentum. Till then, it was just a little bit of or a few novels, but now people started reading a lot, and so it popularity of novel became really something to be credited, and so also drama and prose writing, and poetry was also there. Let's say that it was also there because the one poet that I'm going to introduce you at this stage is Gerard Manley Hopkins, who was a priest, and he wrote his poems. But these poems, maybe towards the end of 19th century, he wrote the poems, but these poems were published or came to light only in the beginning of the 20th century. So you find Hopkins, one of the prominent writers of the period, and I must say one of the most religious poets since Milton. Milton was a religious poet, as we all know, And Gerard Mandy Hopkins was the other religious poet in English poetry who wrote about his vision of Bible and also the teachings of Jesus Christ. And as a priest, he was able to keep that writing capacity with him. But then he was able to write more about spirituality and religion, and also how to look on the religious aspects by the individuals. So here you find that it is something that you will have to keep in mind, because Hopkins was a priest mainly. So when Hopkins started writing, the one poem that became famous was The Wreck of the Dosh Land. The Wreck of the Doshland is an epoch-making poem, I must say, because Doshland was the name of a ship, and it carried some nuns, and that was wrecked. And it is about that the faith of the nuns and the faith of the religious people. It's all that is there, and he speaks of it in terms that really touches your spirit, not your just mind or intellect, but your spirit. And it is in this sense that The Wreck of the Doshland becomes one of the most prominent poems of Gerard Manley Hopkins. Yet another poem which will be of interest to a literature student is the poem called Winnower. Winnower is yet another term for a bird that just balances itself, or rides the wind, and that is how he finds his religion and his spirituality. And so, naturally, this is something that he is to have in his mind. Yeah, so, so Hopkins really did something in this manner. So here you find that it is what he had in his mind to speak of faith and of religiosity and of spirituality. He does this well through his poems. One that is The Wreck of the Doshland, and the other the poem called Winnower. So you find Gerard Manley Hopkins and his poetry not just a theme that is important, but he also introduced something called sprung rhythm, a technique of writing or the use of words which is quite different from the ones that were used by the poets previously. So you need to learn more about the sprung rhythm and how it gives an impetus to the poem, and how it separates, or it in a way takes you from the ordinary to the extraordinary level. So in that manner, Gerard Manley Hopkins is really important to modern literature and especially to modern poetry. And he is one of the poets of the beginning of the 20th century. This is why he is, though he belonged to the end of the 19th century, his poems found light only in the 20th century. So we have to classify him as part of the 20th century writer. Along with him, or maybe on the same level, we have to consider yet another poet, and that is Thomas Stearns Eliot. And mind you that he was not an Englishman. He was born in USA. But because of his inordinate love for all that is English, he came over to England and became a naturalized citizen of England, and settled there and started writing poems and came to be called as an English poet. I'm saying this because in the next class you will learn about yet another person who just goes exactly the opposite way. Okay, so remember, T.S. Eliot or Thomas Stearns Eliot was born in USA, and he came over to England and settled in England and became a naturalized citizen because of his love for all that is English. He became an English poet from then on. He had written several poems, and you will be learning some of the poems, especially the Journey of the Magi. That is a very short poem but really elevating poem, and the most important poem of T.S. Eliot. If you ever hear the mentioning of T.S. Eliot, immediately the next sentence will be, or the next line will be, the wasteland, because the poem Wasteland is that important and that famous. The term wasteland is given to a long poem of 5 sections. Each section is titled, and it has got a category, it has got a story of its own. So the wasteland is about the land, especially London, and it is about the aridity of the land. Not that London became a desert, but because of the lack of spirituality or the nature of the godliness, the country or the place was regarded as the wasteland. Not just London, but also maybe it can be taken to any context, and it could be considered as that wasteland because of so many reasons. And he incorporates a lot of myth and a lot of stories, not just from England, but from almost all parts of the world, even from our India, because the poem ends with the terms, the three words, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Shanti uttered 3 times. This is the Indian way of ending certain things, and it is he had learned a lot about Hinduism and had incorporated it into his poem just to show that you can have the spirituality of India. So the beginning is about the myth of the fisher king, and also the story of Tiresias, and all these characters come, and all these characters are from the mythology of different lands, Egypt and the other countries, and a lot of countries. And all these are incorporated into different sections, and you'll find people talking, and naturally you'll have to to know the story behind that. Only then you will properly understand the poem called The Wasteland. And why did he write a poem in this manner? Actually, it should be a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. But T.S. Eliot has got a totally different opinion about writing poems. He has created the impersonality theory about writing poems. That is, a poet should keep away from his poems. His personality or personal life should not be there in the poems. It should be a thought out process, and it should be academic, and that is what his poems are. And even if you try to search for personal details about T.S. Eliot, you will find very little about his personal details, because he is a person who kept his personal life quite separate from his public life. And so that is seen reflected in his poems also. So when you speak of T.S. Eliot, he experimented with the poetic drama of the ancient times, and he wrote a verse drama called Murder in the Cathedral. And it is about the murdering of Thomas Becket, and it is that he recreates in the verse drama of the earlier times. Verse drama existed even during the time of Shakespeare and even before Shakespeare, but after that it was prose drama. So why did this 20th century person go over to the earlier times and recreate this verse drama in the modern times? And the answer must be that he had so much of admiration for all that is English and English literature. And so he recreated it in the modern times, and it also became one of the best written piece of the modern times, because you can write a poem and you can write a drama in prose, but you will find that it is totally impossible to write a verse drama with the ancient theme from the modern times. It is that which makes him a great poet. because he tried his level best in order to recreate all that is old in his poems, and so in that manner we can say that he is to a certain extent a classicist. But at the same time, he wrote criticism, and in criticism, he advocates certain theories which will be of great use to the poets and also to the people who appreciate poems. So, in that manner, his impersonality theory and also the feeling that uh, the catalysis, that is the Touchstone method, and all these are things that he spoke about in his poetic criticism. So why should he write like this? Because he has got certain idea about writing poetry, and he is of the opinion that poetry should be a well thought out idea which should be written in verse form, and it should also go undergo correction, and it is in this manner it will become one of the best. And if you are too much of an emotional creature, then you can say that poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, but it is also emotions recollected in tranquility. And T.S. Eliot is exactly the opposite of this theory. So the impersonality theory and the Touchstone method and the catalysis, all these are terms that you will find in T.S. Eliot's criticism of poetry, which will be of use to people who aspire to be poets or people who really want to write poems and make them really appreciated by the people. So if that is the case, you will find that T.S. Eliot is indeed one of the literary dictators of the 20th century, because he wrote a poetic drama, he wrote poems, he wrote the epoch making The Wasteland, he wrote poetic criticism or critical theories, and in all fields he had established his own stamp, and this made him the literary dictator of the 20th century. So that title was given to a person who came over to England from America because of his inordinate love for England and all that is English, and he remained more English than a proper Englishman. And in that manner, it was a great honor for him to be given the title the literary dictator of the 20th century. So let's see that it is possible, whether it is possible to have a literary dictator and his theories to be accepted by the modern world. To the modern world, it was acceptable because times were changing, and you will find the great war that the world had ever seen awaiting them. And especially during his time, it was the First World War, and the trauma of the First World War was really too much for his generation, and the country was laid waste by the war that was fought, and people started losing faith also. And maybe it is in that sense he thought of calling the place as the wasteland. So a wasteland where you dump everything but nothing green ever comes out, and naturally there is utter hopelessness, and it is that idea of the human mind that is reciprocated in the poem. And so T.S. Eliot was able to portray the times through his poems, through the epoch making poems, which is divided into 5 sections with a title, and the poem ends with Shanti, 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 which is from taken from our Indian origin. Okay, so in a way, he's an Englishman, or he remained an Englishman, but he was a person who had much contact with the literature of the different countries, and also about he learned about the spirituality of the other countries, and came to the conclusion that India has indeed something to offer them, and that he portrayed towards the end. So the poem ends in a note of Shanti, or peace, and it is that he is wishing for the world to a war-torn Europe. War-torn Europe in the sense the country, not just England, but all the other countries were also taking part, and naturally there is much fear among the people, and loss of faith, and everything is there. And people, youngsters, were drafted for the army, and the fight was to go on, and naturally this had really upset the balancing of the society. So people had to adjust a great deal, family wise, social wise, and even political wise. And it is that which is which is creating an aridity to the land and also to the mind of the people. And it is the way he helped the youngsters to overcome this is through the poems, and the youngsters really accepted him because he is considered to be their guru, because through these five sections he had portrayed all the anguish, all the disappointment, all the feelings of negativity, all that the people were feeling were put into all these sections. And the force he had put in, he had really made it beautiful by introducing the story of the Fisher King, and also about the mythology and folklore of almost all the countries. So you have to read the poem with a lot of references, and only then you will be able to understand it properly. So you find the book Golden Bough, which really influenced him. And if you want to read T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, you'll have to read the book called The Golden Bough, and that again is something that you will have to understand. Okay, so you will find that this literary dictator contributed much. I mentioned only two poems here because these are the two poems which really comes to you people. The Wasteland, of course, and The Journey of the Magi, a short poem, and there are so many other poems also which he wrote. But these two stand out. One, Journey of the Magi, is of course about the three kings coming to visit baby Jesus, and how they appeared, and how their transformation, everything is there. So, in a way, he was trying to put through the poem what he felt regarding religion. And it is not just pushing religion to you in that manner, but making it quite obvious as to how he experienced religion. And this is something the modern world really need to, because in spite of this aridity of lack of faith and lack of religion, people still have to hold on to something, and it is that faith that he is giving us through his poems. So whenever you get time, you can read these poems and understand, especially Journey of the Magi, or you can get the help of your teachers to understand it properly. But I think you will remember T.S. Eliot, the literary dictator of the 20th century, and the writer or the poet who wrote the epoch making poem, The Wasteland, and how he gave the world something really worthwhile to appreciate. Okay. So in the next class, we'll continue with modern literature, especially the interwar period. Interwar period is actually between the First World War and the Second World War. And that you have already studied in your history lessons from your school days. I would like you to refresh your mind with those history lessons. What happened and which all countries participated. All these are really necessary, because in the next class you are going to encounter these encounters of the war, and how people suffered, and what happened to these countries, and how did the poet express themselves through their poems this particular period. So till then, see you. Thank you.